So today we are copying a lovely little study of a woman pulling a cart with a rope. And our goal is to get a sense of the gesture, which involves keeping the head out in front of the weight-bearing feet. And this is going to help us to avoid doing what we often want to do, which is stacking those volumes right on top of each other. So if we look at what we've got here, we've got the head is here, rib cage way off to the right of it, and then the pelvis is angling that way. So we want to try to recreate that movement in the drawing. Keep that rib cage off to the right, and then throw that pelvis even further to the right. Sort of like this. And make sure you notice that the bottom of the chin is actually going to end up being down below the top of the rib cage because of the way she's leaning forward. Now we can appreciate perhaps just why art students try to start out drawing nudes, because we just have to guess at what's going on underneath these skirts. But you can see that the heels are way back. This heel is way back behind the pelvis. And this one's a little bit to the left of it. This one's sort of centered below the pelvis. I want to check my proportions. The greater trochanter should be buried right about here. And we can see that the bottom half of the body below the trochanter should be a little longer than the top half. And that is because the way her head is bent forward. She's not straightened out to her full height, and that's why we get a little asymmetry where normally the greater trochanter would be in the middle. And I'm going to try to, maybe that heel's not quite as far back as I put it. And this one is like this. And I haven't masked out the legs yet. I haven't drawn the skirt, but I'm trying to just see if I can get a feeling in my drawing that she's leaning forward and pulling something. Because until I have that feeling, there would really be little point in adding a bunch of details. You want to build your details around a structure that makes sense. So that's all the time I'm going to give you on this stage. Hopefully you're in kind of good shape. I'm going to erase this stuff now. And we're going to go ahead and zoom in on the face. This face is drawn with really what I would call incredible economy. You don't need to erase your head. I just lightened mine so that I wouldn't be distracted by it. So here's the front of the cranium. Look at that sort of bulging eye. And then we've got this one simple line for the curve of the cheek. the nose ends up being down below the eye. A little hint of an upper lip and a slight hint of a lower lip and chin. And that's really all there is to it. It's just a few lines. Here's the ear, and then the bonnet extends out behind the cranium and sort of fills out some of this space above it. You understand what a bonnet is. She's got like some puffy hair under there. I just noticed I gave her a little too much throat there. This is a really small line under the line of the cheek. That's a little better. I could emphasize the eye a little more. This is called a lost profile. Head is turned away from us. And this one little line just indicates like a loose strand of hair. Now working down, we're gonna draw. Let's look at. Sometimes it's really good to just start looking across the figure at points that are not. Our tendency is always to work from point to point, like from chin to arm, down. But it's really good to look at things that are further away from each other. Like if I check the level of the chin, compare that to the level of this plane change on the back. You see that? It's just not too far below. So here's the level of the bottom of the chin. It's going to help me find this plane change, which is right about here. And the waist kind of curves around the top of the pelvis. This line that I drew here also shows us where the top of the sleeve is. Like that. And then the bottom of the sleeve goes through, is sort of centered on this line. And it's not important to draw these on your references. I just draw them so that you can see the way I'm thinking about it. Because a lot of people just wouldn't think to look to relate a figure on the front, a feature on the front of the figure to a feature on the back of the figure. So our next challenge is to see how far down to put this elbow. And here I'm going to think fractionally. If we go from the top of the head to this plane change on the back of the rib cage, it's about the same distance as from the plane change to the tip of the elbow. And that's a type of thing that you could easily measure. You can hold your pencil up like this and say, yeah, that distance that I've already discovered is the same as this distance that I'm trying to discover. So we're going to go from this plane change, top of the head, double that, and that tells us about where the bottom of the elbow should be. And this vertical that I dropped down from the front of the eyeball is going to give me a good clue for where to put the front of the hand. Which curls around and meets the top of the sleeve. Okay, so that's all pretty much sorted out. I'm going to erase these annotations and zoom out again. And notice this, we've got this other hand just in front of the elbow, wrapping around. And notice the artist makes no attempt to draw every finger. It's a beautifully simplified version of a hand that just shows the gesture. And be careful when you're drawing the front of the skirt. Notice if I pull a plumb line down from here, that whole skirt falls behind the plumb line. So don't let it come out in front of it. And this piece of cloth stops just above this foot, which I think I might need to lower a little. And then this whole cloth thing, I think this is like what they call a bustle, kind of. Have you ever heard of a bustle? It's like these giant appendages that they used to make in women's clothing. So I'm going to do a quick shadow map of the bustle. I've got a few pieces of light on it. I got a piece here, and a piece here, and everything else is in shadow. And just use your most comfortable first shading direction for that. Another secret that I learned once that might be useful to mention is it's another way to relate things in the drawing that aren't right next to each other. Look for similar angles. Often a beautiful drawing like this will be created out of a repetition of a certain angle. And can you see what's happening here? These angles are all very close to being the same. The ones I'm drawing in red. And that creates a really beautiful rhythm to the drawing. And it also gives you a way to draw it better, because when you start looking for similar angles for features that aren't right next to each other, you can make corrections to your drawing if the angles aren't exactly the same. Like I had that was a little off. So try sketching some of these very light angle lines into your drawing and make sure you're creating the same beautiful rhythm that we're seeing in the original. And according to one theory I learned, a lot of great drawings are made up of two main directions, and I would say in this drawing the other main direction is pretty much vertical with maybe a slight, I'm just going to say it's vertical. So these lines are all more or less straight up and down. And that also helps you relate the distant points to each other. You know, like the back of the head lines up with the back of the arm. And again, this is nothing that anyone just sort of, very, very few people just think to do something like this. It's sort of a learned technique that can really help you improve your drawing in a hurry. So we're coming around the back of the skirt now, coming straight up this line and then tucking in a little bit under the bustle. And on this skirt, let's try to actually draw the same. Let's try to use a shading direction and technique that's very close to what we're seeing in the original. See if we can learn anything. There's no first shading in this drawing, so there's little sign of the artist's handedness.
How big is the actual?
Yeah, I don't think this is a very big drawing. I can go to the website. I think it's from the Metropolitan Museum. I can look it up. So don't stress if it's not perfect, but just try to learn something from the shading technique that you're seeing here. It's such a simple little drawing. There's really it's so expressive of the pose, but there's really not, in terms of line work, there's not a whole lot to it. And I'm going to zoom out and work on the feet in the background. Should just take a minute. These are probably like clogs or something, so not footwear that I'm very used to drawing. So I'm just copying the pattern of lines that I see there. This seems like some kind of a legging or slack, and then this other possibly wooden shoe. With the first shading across there. And as I'm always reminding you, on the ground, horizontal shading is mostly all you need. And for background, we have precisely 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. We've got 2 lines here, 3 here, 1, 2. That's the entire background of this drawing. And then the actual rope is interestingly represented. It's white when it crosses in front of the shirt, like that, and then it turns into more of a outline as it extends back. And the only thing I forgot to do, there is a little bit of form shading on the arm. See that little detail of that muscle puckering out right here. Little overlap here, and then a little bit of soft shading on the back of the arm here with just a suggestion of reflected light. Also a little behind the ear and the back of the hat. So as you do your studies today, I would love for some of you to consciously try to employ one or two of the things, recreate one or two of the qualities that you like in this drawing, if you like anything about it, in your own studies. Because that's how we make progress in art, not by ignoring the past, but by basically just lifting things that we like from every different period in art history and making those techniques our own through practice. And I just noticed that my bustle doesn't come out far enough. So I'm going to do that. And somehow my elbow feels just a little, this part of the arm feels a little bit long to me. I might lower this a tiny bit and raise the elbow just a hair. And that's going to have to be good enough. Oh, maybe a little more depth to this part of the rib cage too. Okay, I like that better. Thank you for your attention, and I'll see you next time if you're watching this on YouTube.